I wish to begin by sharing with you some information I received on electromagnetic zones of the planet Earth. This would have been around 2007. However, I'm updating it as I go along here to apply it to 2022. 250 years ago, there were 32 electromagnetic zones of the planet Earth. As of 2022, there are 61. At the point of LP40, that's light principle 40, there will be 72. Thus, there's a rapid escalation of the creation of electromagnetic zones in the Earth as a result of the movement toward light principle 40. Light principle 40 is the flashpoint when this Earth, its consciousness, its genetic sovereignty, and spiritual connection to the cosmos will relocate from a world system 1 to a world system 2, and in this case, Thoth is calling it the new Earth star. The souls upon this planet who choose to go with her and carry the planetary genius of this world into the next stage of development, they will also transcend this reality and this matter world. To continue with the reading, the average person on Earth at this time operates on 1 to 3 electromagnetic zones. We clarify here that this is a specific type of other world or other dimension. It has to do with the planet you're incarnated on and its higher electromagnetic properties. As of May 2007, I asked Thoth, when you say the average person on the Earth at this time operates on 1 to 3 electromagnetic zones, what do you truly mean? Is this to say that they are incarnated in various dimensional physical bodies in these zones at the same time? Thoth replies, yes, their experience multiplies in frequency of various particle gradients, denser or lighter, within the same time continuum. I then ask, I would assume that each of these forms affects the other, all those in the same time continuum? Thoth responds, they are interactive, yes. They become a cohesive unit, like cells in a body. They may not consciously be aware of one another, but on a cellular and DNA level, they are in communication. In the dream state, this is often brought through to the mind on that level of reflectivity. I then ask, what is the purpose of electromagnetic zones on a planet? Why are they not static? And what does their rapid increase in number have to do with the new Earth star ascension? Thoth responds, electromagnetic zones keep the whole mechanics of a planet stable from its physical rotation and protecting it from a certain amount of cosmic bombardment of magnetic particles, to creating various planes of its dimensionality. This is a large topic, but briefly, without the electromagnetic zones of a planet, it would simply fall apart into chaos. The number of zones can increase or decrease depending upon the current impelling forces placed upon the planet. The whole electromagnetic system of a planet is in a dance of balance within the impelling forces, such as the many cosmic forces exerted upon it, as well as the interdimensional forces, being guided by the greater intelligences, hierarchies, angelic, Elohim, etc. The electromagnetic properties of a planet are not intended to shut out these impelling forces, but strike a balance for the planet with them. As the current Earth moves deeper into its new Earth hologram, and thus closer to the new Earth star ascension, more electromagnetic zones are needed to translate, balance, and sustain the greater impelling forces being generated by this extremely dynamic move of old Earth as a System 1 world to new Earth as a System 2 world. Now, let us take a look for a moment before I continue with the article about World System 1 and World System 2. Of course, I've mentioned it many times on other videos, so I'll be brief here. World System 1 is a world of entropy. Things break down. You could say a lot more about it, but let's keep it simple. World System 2 is a system of syntropy. Things move toward the center of consciousness. They don't need to break down. Forms are changing. Energies are translating, but nothing breaks down. So to continue, I state, on January 24th, 2001, one of our spacecraft detected, quote, shock reformation in the Earth's magnetosphere predicted only in theory over 20 years ago, unquote. In one article on this subject, this shock reformation is described as coming from, quote, giant whirlpools of electrically charged gas some 40,000 kilometers across. These whirlpools inject electrified gas into the magnetic environment of the Earth. The magnetic field generated inside the Earth protects the planet from the electrically charged particles given out by the sun. However, it is only a partially effective shield. Whirlpools of plasma can be whipped up by this configuration. Such whirlpools are known as Kelvin-Helmholtz instabilities, and scientists suspected them of being the location of magnetic reconnection, but no one has found any conclusive evidence that this is the case. End of quotes. It would seem obvious that these whirlpools affect the electromagnetic system of Earth. Just how do they impact the electromagnetic zones and thus our evolution as a planet as we progress into a world system 2? Thoth. The whirlpools of electrically charged gas and plasma are fuel for the electromagnetic zones. They supply the zones and indeed the whole planetary electromagnetic system of Earth with its ability to sustain and balance all its internal and external forces. The electroplasma is driven to a quantum state in which it is constantly moving in and out of the different zones and helping to create the necessary new ones through this quantum action. The Lotus Loci, light plasma creational forms of the new Earth, are refined forms of this same type of plasma activity. Now, the Lotus Loci is a whole other topic, but these are light plasmic beings that reside in the new Earth reality, and they also reside within our physical bodies. They're not really very active at this time, but they will be within the New World system. I'm not going to pursue it any further in this particular video, but that's the basis of it. To continue, back to the subject of a soul incarnating in two or more electromagnetic zones within the same time continuum. You, Thoth, have told me in the past that while not average, it is not rare for a soul to have more than one incarnation in the same electromagnetic zone. But why does the soul sometimes need more than one incarnating vehicle in the same time continuum? From Thoth, when a soul incarnates in different electromagnetic zones within the same time continuum, it is arranging its experiential focus according to the needs of its entire magna or oversoul, the greater soul, sending streams down into bodily incarnations. When a soul incarnates into several bodies within the same electromagnetic zone, it is splintering its focus in order to avoid the full charge of the experience. This avoidance can be beneficial or it can be counterproductive, depending upon many factors. That ends the transmission on electromagnetic zones. So now I would like to bring it up to 2022 and some of the understanding that I've received since that time and how it relates to the subject of the reality war. First of all, electromagnetic zones are not just about, for the soul, are not just about where that soul can park its frequency. In other words, oh, I have lifetimes on 3 different electromagnetic zones. It's not as simple as that, because these electromagnetic zones communicate with one another. So it's not separate packages like we might think. Let's say a particular soul that's incarnated here and now, in what we call here and now, in this electromagnetic zone. Let's say they were incarnating on 3 or maybe 4 electromagnetic zones. That doesn't mean that they just had 3 or 4 lives. They could have many more than that, because these zones, while they're specific frequency corridors, are not containment fields. So they are constantly communicating with one another and setting up reality zones for incarnational experience coming from the overall magna soul of that, shall we say, dare to say, individual. So that magna soul is streaming souls into physical form. And the geomagnetic zones of the planet allow a structure, a function to evolve, so that the soul can express itself in more than one aspect of planetary experience. But all of these aspects are in communication with one another. Now, I know this may be difficult to grasp, it is for me, but we're always, thinking in our linear reality, and this is beyond that, because the true realities of a planet, any functional, ensouled planet, is a path of multiplicity, and it does not rely on singular awareness or linear experience. We may have those experiences in touch points, but that's not where it's really coming from. And so, there are souls on this planet that have been decimated by their own choices in incarnation. And this has happened over eons of time. There are other factors involved as well, but it all has to do with the choices the soul makes, whether in incarnation or on other dimensions. And these choices can sometimes almost completely shut a soul down to where it is functioning in an incarnation almost as an automated entity. And in this automation, generally it is co-opted by what Thoth refers to as the archonic cloud, kind of a cloud virus of the universe. And that causes it to serve the lower masters. Now, as I've stated before, Thoth is adamant that no soul is evil, but it can be basically possessed. I don't even want to use that word because it has some connotations that we really don't want to go off into here. But certain souls are, let's say, co-opted, that's a better word, by very low form vibrations. And so they're not really operating at all, in touch with at all, or if any, barely, with their higher selves. And I'm not speaking of people who've just kind of gone off the path, and they're searching and they're a little bit lost and they got to come back on the path and all of that. I'm talking about souls that are what Thoth calls archonically invested. And those are the big kahunas that it's going to take a long time and a lot of clearing and a lot of lifetimes and a lot of inner plane work to bring them back to the divine spark that all souls contain. Now, I mention this here because we're talking about the reality war. And such archonically invested souls are working to close down and to the ability for souls to communicate with their other selves in these electromagnetic zones. And when I say communicate, you may think, well, I don't think I'm communicating. You may not be consciously, but you are communicating. Now, I don't know that most of these archonically invested souls have any idea of any of this. Maybe some do. But they're being controlled by other archonically invested off-world beings that do understand this, at least in scientific principle. So part of the war here is a control over the electromagnetic zones. And no negative force can control the electromagnetic zones of a planet completely. But again, as I've mentioned before in this series, these negative forces can run interference into all these properties of the planet, even on quantum levels to an extent. Fortunately, there are barriers, but those barriers don't keep them from making it very difficult for us as human beings to connect to that higher development phase that we're entering now. So what to do? Well, we've talked about some of these things. And with the electromagnetic zones, that is something that the star kindred and inner earth kindred are working diligently to stabilize. One of the ways that the One World Legion, the OWL, what often people call the One World Order, elites or whatever, one of the things they do to help to disturb and really co-opt to some degree, the electromagnetic fields and thus zones is through very current technology, 5G, and other things that we're not even aware of. Can't call them by a number because they don't have one yet. But all these things are, they're just saturating the vibrational planet with these frequencies so that they can dim down and co-opt what they need to control their scenario. And that means that they could literally, or this is what they have proposed to themselves, is to be able to bend the electromagnetic fields. I'm going to use the word bend because that's what Thoth is giving me just now, like bending light, to be able to create these pockets of where their timelines can run. And we can, we would have to like bend into that because our electromagnetic fields, like little pigeons with magnets in their heads, flying to home. If you bent the field, the pigeons would be going to wherever you bent it to and not to their true home. Same thing here. We are the pigeons. So looking at this, we understand the importance of the work that the star kindred and inner earth kindred are doing to be able to stabilize these zones. And it is not without our cooperation. Through prayer, through meditation, through affirmation, through awareness, more than anything, awareness. And you don't have to understand everything I'm talking about here or use Thoth speak. It's understanding it in principle, in consciousness, from the heart. Even if you've never heard this video, just people on the planet, whatever religion or spiritual focus they have, if they have a heart awareness frequency, they are helping to keep stable these electromagnetic zones and to keep them in perpetuation so that we reach the 72 zones we need by the time we're ready for Light Principle 40. There is out there information on a particular entity, an ET entity, that was, I believe, called J-Rod. And some government links spoke about him. He had been captured, by what I would call, from the Thoth perspective, One World Legion, And he, talked about that he was from the future, and this is, our future, and there was more about it. I haven't heard it all or studied it all, really I'm not guided to do so. However, I'm bringing it up because these type of entities, and they've come before, they're not all the Greys and whatever, but the ones that are saying, oh, we're you from the future, they are from the timeline, the very timeline that we do not want to go down. We don't want to go down that timeline because it is an artificial creation, and it takes one to an artificial reality where everything is technological, AI, and focused on genetic engineering in a way that controls systems rather than opens to spirituality. So these J-rods out there, and they may have a certain amount of wisdom. Oh, you mustn't destroy the planet and da-da-da-da-da. But this is, you can't trust them any more than you can trust your own government. They have their line. They have their spiel that they're going to give you. And indeed, many of them that say they're from the future, probably all of them that say they are from the future are, but they're not from the future that we wish to embrace. Because moving into a world system into what Thoth refers to poetically perhaps as the new Earth star. It's a star frequency. That's why he puts the word star on the end of it. It's not just a planet with rocks and soil. It moves into the frequency of becoming within the star, not rotating around it. All higher evolved worlds operate within their stars and not rotating around it on little rocks and soil. That does not mean that we don't see a planet when we go to a planet inside a sun. We do see one. That's a whole other topic. I'm not going there here. But back to J-Rod and his future that he says is our future. It's only our future if we say, I'm not accepting the transformation into a world system too. Now, I'm not talking about a belief system. I'm not saying you're listening to me here and you're thinking, oh, well, do I want to accept what Maya's saying here or not? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about your inner being, whether you've ever heard this video or not. When time comes, are you going to choose that frequency or not? Because it's going to come to you, and you're going to feel it and know it. And at that moment, your soul is going to say, I choose to do this, or I'm not going. I don't want to do this. And that makes the difference. So if you choose in that moment to go into the newer star, you have broken the connection with the old cycles that are now taking the old planet into a further and further away from spiritual consciousness, into an altered reality, a designer reality. That is exactly where the archonic forces wish you to go. So back to the electromagnetic zones. This has to do with breaking the cycles of these zones. Because when we move into the world system 2 experience, our baseline changes. It changes, like we're not coming back, like incarnating back to this baseline. Here we are again, on this same timeline, and here this is happening, and now this is happening. I was in this war, and now I'm going to be in this war, because I'm in another body, but I'm in another war. It's going to break that cycle and place us into a whole new revolution and evolution, so that our baseline shifts completely into a higher form. What's going to happen with the old Earth? Well, Thoth says that it's going to eventually be destroyed. It's not destroyed. I don't know if that's the right word. It's just going to dissolve. So what about these future beings? Well, it will dissolve if we move into the world system 2 from our reality frame, from our understanding, our viewpoint. The old world will be no more. It will dissolve. It will be absorbed into solar cycles or whatever. I'm not exactly sure, but it's going to be gone. But if you stay with this timeline that they want you to go to so that J-Rod becomes your future self, you'll still see the old world back there because it will have taken you to this point. That's basically how it's designed. So let's end on a happy note, shall we? And I'm going to say that happy note is you have a choice. And it isn't a part of a belief system. It's not a part of believing what I say or Thoth says. It's simply an internal process. And you will know it when you get there. And maybe you won't get there in this lifetime. But again, you'll be here nonetheless. Thoth has assured us all, if we are part of this earth consciousness spiritual program, which we all are. If you're listening to this, you are. I don't care which star your soul might have come from originally. You're here now. You will remain with this cycle in some other dimension, maybe incarnating back, but very likely in just some other dimension of it. Maybe some of your electromagnetic zone lifetimes will still continue, and this one won't. When this one's over, all kinds of different scenarios. But you're going to be here. And when LP40 happens, you're going to be experiencing it in one way or another. And you will be translated into the nearest star per your choosing at that time. But why wait till the last minute? Why don't we start choosing it now? And living our lives as that choice is before us, like a shining sun. It is dictating the way we wish to live our lives so that we can be absorbed into that consciousness, into that future reality. So I conclude here with this episode of The Reality War. Thank you for listening.